This is the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and I've been using this phone as my daily phone for the last month. And in today's video, we're gonna find out if this phone and the 16 Pro are worth your money. So I'm gonna admit it, I'm a die-hard iPhone user. I've been using iPhone since the iPhone 5, and while yes, there's been a lot of Android phones that have come into the rotation for a couple months, usually I'll find myself going back to iPhone. And a lot of the reason for that is because I use my iPhone as literally my video camera. I film tons of content on this phone, whether it's for this channel or my main channel or any of my social media platforms, and I find that this phone generally tends to have the best camera. And that's also the reason why I've mainly picked up the iPhone Pro Max versus the iPhone Pro for the last couple of years. Not just because of the bigger screen, but because up until now, the cameras have been better on the Pro Max. And this year, like every year for the last couple of years, I bought myself the brand new Pro Max and my wife the brand new Pro, and I tested these iPhones for the last month. Like I said, this was my daily driver, and of course, I also tested my wife's phone, not as much as this phone because this was my daily phone, but over the last month, I've gotten a really good feel of the brand new iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max, and in today's video, we're gonna find out whether this phone is worth your hard-earned money because this is an expensive phone. So the iPhone 16 Pro starts at $999 here in the United States with 128 gigabytes. You can upgrade it to up to a terabyte worth of storage, but it's gonna get a lot more expensive. Whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max starts at $1199, but you start with 256 gigabytes of storage, and of course you can also upgrade to a terabyte. And of course, like a lot of years, Apple gave us the same colors that we've had before and a new color, and in this case, we've got black titanium, white titanium, natural titanium, which was the new color last year, and the brand new desert titanium, which is sort of a goldish color. In fact, that's the phone that my wife got. She doesn't usually like gold phones, but there's something about this new version that I think her and I both liked. And I decided to go with black just because, I don't know, I haven't had a black iPhone in so long. I usually get the new color, but there's something about this one that's just kind of stealthy. Now, even though this year's iPhone looks a lot like last year's iPhone and probably a lot like some of the previous iPhones from years before, it has changed physically a little bit. First of all, Apple's increased the size of this year's iPhones. The iPhone 16 Pro went from 6.1 inches to 6.3 inches, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max went from 6.7 inches to 6.9 inches. Now, sure, that is just a 0.2 inch difference. It's not super noticeable, but when you compare the two iPhones together, you can notice a difference. And it seems like the way that they've achieved this newer screen size is not only by making the iPhone itself slightly taller, but also by decreasing the size of the bezels around the screen. They seem definitely skinnier than last year's. Really, only the other major physical change on this phone is the new camera button that you have on the right side of the phone, which is somewhat touch sensitive, but also kind of a button. We'll talk about this more once we get to the camera, but I will say that I rarely use it, and I think that Apple actually designed this for something else, and they made it a camera button at the last minute. So spec-wise, both the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max feature the A18 Pro chip, which is a slightly faster chip for all your processing needs, and apparently it's specially made for Apple's brand new AI system. Apple Intelligence is what they call it. That said, while apparently there is some sort of spec bump, I didn't notice it from day-to-day usage, even when compared to my previous iPhone, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It just seems like another iterative improvement on Apple's chips and silicon. It's something that you probably would notice a pretty large jump if you looked back like 2 generations or 3 generations, but from generation to generation, you're not going to notice that big of a difference. And that said, I had no issues with the speed or the processing power of this iPhone. It played all the games that I played very easily. I didn't have any stuttering, any problems like that, at least not with the processor. To my knowledge, there was some stuttering in some other aspects of this phone, which we'll talk about in a minute. But overall, pretty happy with the A18 Pro, even though I don't really notice a huge difference. On both the brand new iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max, you've got a Super Retina XDR OLED display with 460 pixels per inch. Obviously, the dimension of the screen changes depending on which size that you get, but they both feature 460 pixels per inch. They also both feature a ProMotion display, which essentially allows your phone to have a refresh rate of 120 Hz all the way down to 1 Hz, depending on what your phone is doing, which gives you a very buttery experience when you're swiping back and forth between pages. But now let's talk about Apple's marquee feature on the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max, and that is Apple Intelligence. It's not here yet. We still don't have it. This was supposed to be their main feature on the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max, but apparently it doesn't come out till later this fall. Fall is almost over. I'm not sure exactly when it's coming. It's their new AI system. Apparently it's great, according to Apple, but of course they're going to say that. I'm excited to try it out. And if you guys want to see a full video on it when it comes out, I will do that. But for right now, you can't really review it. This is almost not even a complete iPhone review because you can't review their main feature. And that's one of the reasons why they made the A18 Pro chip, because it's supposed to be specially made for AI and Apple Intelligence. But unfortunately, we won't have it for the next month or two. Possibly longer. So yeah, that is a problem that they created for themselves. If they hadn't said that they were going to launch it with this iPhone, no one would care. but unfortunately they did. And because of that, that's a pretty big negative on this phone. You don't get the new feature that they're touting on this phone until probably a couple months from now. This iPhone does, however, come with iOS 18, which is their latest operating system. Unlike the recently released Google Pixel phones, which I actually just reviewed, links at the top of the screen, which didn't feature the latest version of Android because it hadn't come out yet, because they were trying to beat Apple to the punch when it came to phone releases. So at least on this phone, we are getting iOS 18 out of the box, which is their latest operating system and does some cool new things. Now let's talk about the reason that I pick up an iPhone every single year, and that is the camera system. Visually, the camera array looks very similar to last year's iPhones. However, unlike last year's iPhones, the 16 Pro and the Pro Max featured the same cameras. Up until now, the cameras have not been as nice on the Pros as they are on the Pro Maxes. It's usually a very small difference, but there is a difference there. This time around, you get the same camera system, so whether you get the slightly smaller phone or the big boy, like I got, you get the same camera. Speaking of the cameras, the main camera is a 48 megapixel camera. You've got a new 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera and a 12 megapixel 5x optical zoom camera. And all these cameras, like you would expect, look amazing. They are not huge jumps over previous years, but they are definitely improved over the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, and I will say that I'm never disappointed by the iPhone's camera. Of course, like last year, the video recording on the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max is best in class in my opinion. It's absolutely amazing. To be fair, Samsung is catching up, and their cameras look amazing, but in different ways, and I would be using a Samsung Galaxy Ultra in place of an iPhone if necessary for my video recording needs. However, the iPhone does tend to have, in my opinion, a more realistic look, and that's why I tend to use the iPhone for video over something like a Samsung. That said, this phone still has all of the classic video features that you'd want, like 4K, 4K 120, even more than that. There's more pro settings, which I've actually turned on and off. I now shoot in RAW on this phone, which is kind of wild. There's so much data, the file sizes are a lot larger, but you can do a lot more. And like I said, for my main channel, Seth Fowler, which is my sneaker channel, if you guys haven't checked it out, there will be a link in the description below. A lot of my vlogs, if not all of my vlogs, are filmed on my iPhone because it's just that good of a camera. I have a vlogging camera, I film on Sonys, I love my Sonys, but the iPhone camera is just so dang good, and the fact that you can just pull it out of your pocket to film whenever you want is incredible. It's truly a game changer. So that's why I film with my iPhone for vlogs, because it's always with me. The camera quality is astounding how good it is for something this small. And I mean, big creators, people like Ryan Trahan also film on their iPhone, so if they can do it, then you can too. Software-wise, Apple has added some new features to the camera, like being able to change the warmth and the different, essentially, filters on your phone, so you can get really interesting looks on your photos. And of course, they've added the camera button, which you can click, and it takes you right to the camera. However, for me, sometimes it stutters, and when I'm trying to catch a moment with my daughter, or, you know, a vlogging moment, it just doesn't open the camera fast enough. And it's not all the time. When I just do it with the camera shortcut right there on the main screen, it never has an issue. So I don't know exactly why that is, but it's very frustrating. I'm sure it's just a software issue and it's probably gonna be fixed very quickly, and it actually doesn't happen on my wife's phone. Maybe it's something that's wrong with my actual phone, I don't know. But either way, because of that, I never use this button. Also, the zoom on this button, the capacitive zoom, is just such a frustrating zoom feature. It's not like a camera lens where you can turn it exactly where you want. It doesn't feel precise. It feels gimmicky. And while yes, it is, I mean, it's a cool feature. It is cool being able to zoom in and out by like pressing and holding and doing things like that. It's not something I'd ever use. And like I said earlier on in the video, I think that this button wasn't originally intended to be a camera button. I actually think that this button was intended to be the Apple Intelligence button. But when the phone came out and Apple Intelligence wasn't a thing yet, they made it a camera button. And that's fine. And I guess it does kind of work when you're taking photos like this, but like it would just make so much sense if you just click it like this and Apple Intelligence pops up. I don't know. Seems useless to me. I remember the days when mock-ups of the new iPhone would come out and there was no buttons on them. But for some reason, Apple just keeps adding buttons. And two of them, in my opinion, are useless. The action button and the camera button. Yes, I do use the action button as a mute button, but I don't need to. I guess it doesn't make the phone worse. I just sometimes accidentally click it. So yeah, I guess it does make the phone worse. But finally, let's talk about another big improvement of this iPhone versus previous iPhones, and that's the new battery life. The battery life on the iPhone 16 Pro Max is mind-blowing. I get at least a day with this iPhone. I could probably get a day and a half if I really wanted to with a bunch of usage, but I usually charge it up at night. If I'm filming on this phone for the entire day, I could get probably 5 to 8 hours on it. If I'm just scrolling, web browsing, playing games, I could probably get like 10 to 12. And if I just have it on, probably 18 to 24. Just regular light usage. And similar with the iPhone 16 Pro, obviously a little bit less. I can't tell you quantitatively how much less, but I can tell you that it is a little bit less. Obviously, The size of the iPhone 16 Pro Max allows it to have a bigger battery. I will say though that it is a noticeable improvement over the 15 Pro and Pro Max. So overall, the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max are the best iPhones that Apple has ever released. That said, they're not perfect. And for me, that's frustrating because the problems that I have with this phone are problems that Apple sort of caused themselves and didn't need to cause. Things like promising Apple Intelligence with the new iPhone. It's not here yet, and they made it the marquee feature of this phone. Secondly, this camera button. Why did they add it? I don't know. I've never used it when I wasn't testing it, and I probably never will use it, just because it feels slower and less responsive than the actual screen button, which is crazy. That said though, it's still an incredible iPhone, the best iPhone they've ever made with incredible battery life and amazing cameras. And if you're looking for the best-in-class video that you can get from any phone, the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max are the way to go. These phones are absolutely amazing when it comes to video and photos. And if you're already in the Apple ecosystem, you're probably gonna buy one of these anyway. You don't even need to watch a review. You probably already plan to pre-order it, buy it, or wait till the next one. Actually, speaking of that, let's talk about who this phone is for. I think this phone is for people who either want the latest iPhone, want to upgrade from their iPhone 13 or 14, or have never owned an iPhone before and would like an iPhone. I think this phone is perfect for all of those people. If you're like me and you want the latest iPhone every year because you want the best specs and you want the best video recording, this is a phone for you. If you have an older iPhone that's not a 15 Pro or Pro Max, then yes, it's probably worth the upgrade. And again, if you don't have an iPhone, get this one. This is the best one. However, if you do have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, I don't know if this phone is worth the upgrade. And I'll be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have upgraded if I wasn't going to do this video. I think it's a great phone. I love it. It's incredible. I love the cameras. But the difference between the cameras on this phone versus my old 15 Pro Max are negligible. The battery, while yes, it's a huge improvement, that alone did not justify buying a new iPhone. So if you have a 15 Pro or Pro Max and you don't need the latest iPhone, I would say stick with them. You're good to go. Anything older than that, maybe anything older than a 14 Pro or Pro Max, depending on what you're doing with that phone, then yes, upgrade. But otherwise, I think you're good to go. So to answer the question that I posed at the beginning of this video, yes, the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max are worth it if you don't have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max. If you do, just wait until next year. But hey, that pretty much wraps up the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.